escape the COVID-19 hysteria. It's been quite a time for introverts, hasn't it?
I'd say it's more been quite a time for extroverts because as introverts, life hasn't changed a whole lot. We're still home about as much as we usually are. But I think the extroverts, some of them are downright having psychological breaks because you know, they're not able to get out there.
Oh yes. For the extroverts, it's been a hard time. But for the introverts, we get to go to the store. People aren't bothering us. We're not trying to stand too close, start conversations. I mean, that's what I mean. Quite a time.
I know, with the whole social distancing thing, I already like to stand 6 feet away from people.
Yeah,
so.
It's been fabulous. I mean, we're both introverts, and actually that part's been pretty cool.
You know how many hugs and handshakes I didn't have to go through since this has happened?
Having Asperger's, Candy is almost got like, oh, this person's going to try to hug me. You know, you didn't have to worry about that for this. I mean, we've been good that way, you know.
I know, well, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's been a long time since I've had the thought, uh-oh, they're coming in for a hug. Get ready, get ready.
Yeah. Yeah, she hasn't had to brace herself for this whole thing. But now if the government gets too tyrannical and we move into the concentration camp scenario, then that's going to be the time for extroverts. You're going to have all these people around you can talk to all the time. For us introverts, it'll be horrible.
Ugh.
Other than that, it'll just be a concentration camp. So,
Let's see what type of concentration goes on.
Yes, concentrate. For us TI heroes, that's a usual thing.
He's an INTP.
INTP. Well, that's the thing. So Candy, INTJ, I'm an INTP, and together, INTJs and INTPs can plow through just about any problem and come up with answers and solutions. And that's what we've got for you today. This video is going to cover, I'll just quickly go over the topics that it's going to cover and our sections. So the first section is going to be the response, the government's response and how you can kind of think of it, how it's been. The second item will be the COVID-19, what it does to you, and why do people die from this? How is it killing them? So we'll explain that so that you can have a little more understanding. With understanding, I think there's less fear. That's what we're shooting for on that. Of course, get out of the hysteria, right? We're going to back that hysteria down for you. Then, how to prevent fatalities from COVID-19. Treatments that people can do. Yes, things you can do so that you or your loved ones don't have to die with this thing. And there are things out there. All right, mask hysteria.
The fake-demic mask hysteria.
Ooh, mask hysteria. I mean, we've got governors and mayors, you know, mandating that you've got to put a mask on. Is this the right thing to do? Rather than having a feel-good, everybody will feel better if they're wearing a mask, you're not doing your civic duty. Rather than just getting stuck up in all that, let's just look at the science and see where it leads us. So we'll have that as a wrap-up at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and go into the response. Now, the government's response, we already had one video on that. The first 2 weeks, you know, that was a prudent and good thing to do. We didn't know what groups of people were susceptible to this thing, and you really, you know, we didn't have a whole lot of information on that. And I think you at least want to slow down the spread of it while you figure out who could possibly die from it and how to identify those groups of people, and that way they can take some measures to at least distance themselves, even if the rest of us aren't going to continue doing that. So the first 2 weeks, I think, is definite we needed to do that. The next 4 weeks, not too bad of an idea, because we want to see if there's anything we can do to help the people who are dying from it. And if we can slow the spread while we figure out what to do for the people who will die, well, that's a good idea. And as you know, this whole thing, the lockdown came in March. And what we're going to talk about a little bit later in the video is how a doctor since March has had a treatment that he's had 100% success with. And that includes people who were very sickly to begin with. They had cancer, were on chemotherapy, people who were the typical people that would die from this. And he's had 100% success rate on treating those people. But now, here we are with starting to spread fast again now that people are getting together. Well, you know, it's basically a hyper cold virus. And how long do you think you're going to be able to hide from the cold virus? Like I said, hiding from it in the beginning while we're trying to figure out who's at risk and what can we do about the people who are dying, good idea. But now that we have answers, now it's not making so much sense to shut down the economy, make it hard for people to feed their families. We can go ahead and go into our reserve stores and the government can hand us checks to pay for things even if you lost your job in the meantime. We could play that game here, but for the countries that don't have a bunch of reserve stuff and they have their production lines have been shut down from this, people could actually be dying from starvation.
And people are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The number of people that will die from the COVID response, the lockdowns, will probably in some of these countries be bigger than the people that would have died if they hadn't done anything, which is what they did in Sweden. They said, let's just let this go. Although in Sweden they did identify the groups so those people could be careful. And I think they've actually done a really good job over there because they've got a good chance for immunity.
Oh, yeah.
So I think our response now, if you've got treatments, and we do, for people who are in the high-risk groups of dying from this, well, really, we need to get back to life as normal. And for the countries that don't have reserve stuff that they can just lean on if the government hands money out, where if they don't have the stuff, it doesn't matter how much money the government hands you, you can't go buy anything with it because you're out of things to buy, they have to get back on the normal track. Okay, so now that we've identified the groups of who's at risk and who's not at risk, it turns out that some of the latest published numbers by the CDC show a 0.65% fatality rate. And that's, of course, if you don't do anything, like the doctor in Texas has already developed a treatment for it. So 0.65, well, that's quite a bit higher than the flu. But with the treatment, we don't have to go there. But let's look at those numbers from the CDC. I'll just bring that up. Let's look at these numbers. Now, these are different scenarios that the CDC goes through to help planning for governments and stuff like that. They go for a scenario of about 2.5 RO, which is a infection rate. 2.5 people get it for every person who's got it. And they kind of land there. They're the current best estimate. And there's your 0.0065. Well, that's an actual decimal point number, so if you go for a percentage, that moves the decimal place 2 places to the right, and you get 0.65, which is 6.5 times the number of people who die from the flu. But you've got to remember that these numbers do not include the fact that it looks like we've actually had this disease over here since August. So a whole bunch more people have actually been infected. If we were able to test the United States' entire population and find out how many people actually had the disease versus their death rate, this number goes down big time. It might even hit the flu rate. I'm not sure where we would be. But like I said before, the fatality numbers can drop to almost nothing, as we'll find out a little bit later when we talk about the treatments that are available. Okay, so now let's show you a clip of one of the more respected doctors in New York City and what he has to say about where we are with the COVID and how we got there.
The Chinese government did not give us a lot of information about this virus. The human-to-human transmission was not really known. And now we find out that the whole WHO, along with the Chinese government, were not coming forward, and they did not give our president and the country all the information we needed. So we had to learn everything on our own. And so we are finding out that this virus has been around since August of last year. So what that means is that probably millions of Americans may have antibodies. I've seen in my own practice so many patients that have come and said, look, I have no symptoms, but I have the antibodies, which is fine. That means that they have recovered well. The biggest news and the biggest decision that we made was the fact that the President of America, President Trump, put a travel ban against this virus. That saved millions and millions of Americans, and people need to understand that the first rule of any infectious disease or virus is isolation and containment, and that's what he did. Since then, we have learned a lot. The fact that, the mixed messages You may get this virus from the surface, you may not get this from the virus. Asymptomatic people are not going to be contagious. 24 hours after WHO took it back and said asymptomatic people are contagious. As a result of all of these mixed messages, people are confused, they're losing their trust, and it's our job as someone who cares for this country, and you know how much I care about America, is to really come forward and give the facts to the best of our knowledge. But I want to tell the public that we have made a huge progress. We are in very good position. We have many treatment options, which I'm happy to talk to you about. Our hospitals are extremely equipped, and I believe in the healthcare system in America, and we will win against this virus.
The doctor, was just now talking to us about how it was good to hold, kind of contain the virus, keep it from spreading real fast at the beginning, but now we have treatment options, and we've come a long way. And so what I think is important, one of the things is how the media is not really telling the people this. Did you know that there's treatments out there, that there's been a doctor in Texas that's had successful treatment since March, 100% success rate? Did you know that the hydroxychloroquine that Trump was recommending, the one where the Democrat congresswoman came out and said that she took that right when she didn't think she had a chance of coming through this, and then she did come through this, that has been working for people? And the great thing about that one is you can be in the middle of the cytokine storm, which is where your lungs start filling up with fluid, and if you take the hydroxychloroquine drug, it looks like it'll get you out of it. Let's talk about what COVID-19 does and how it actually works to kill the people that it does kill. What COVID is really is it's a very hyperactive cold virus, chest cold. I had it back in January. I didn't even know what it was at the time. It did last 3.5 weeks. It was a bit annoying, but I didn't miss a day of work. And chickenpox was a lot more uncomfortable. So I didn't miss a day of work. One of the reasons is that my company had this crazy policy that they didn't care if you went to the doctor and got a note. If you were ever sick and missed a day, they would write you up for it. So I just came to work, and it was never so bad that I had to stay home. But I got to spread it all around, That was their policy before the whole lockdown thing in March. They've changed that policy quite a bit, I must say. Yeah, I had it. It took about 3.5 weeks to get rid of it. I'd say over 3/4 of the people at the company I worked for had it before the middle of February. We were pretty much all done with it. And it's not really that bad. I was able to go to work every day. But for the people who it is bad for, the ones who, as Trump says, if it hits the right person, it gets really ugly really fast. What's happening there? What's the difference? And is there something you can do about it? And the answer is yes. It's a virus that multiplies quickly, and when it does multiply quickly, if your immune system is not up to speed before you catch this, it can multiply so quickly that when your secondary response kicks in and it's time for your body to go kill it, it reacts so massively to it, and it is a chest cold that the response in your lungs causes so much fluid in there that you literally get a kind of pneumonia and you will drown in your own fluids. And so that's what can happen to you. It turns out that vitamin D, and I didn't even know this until I studied this whole thing because of COVID, it turns out that vitamin D is key to your body not allowing this thing to replicate in the first place. Keeps the numbers of the virus down, and then you don't get the cytokine storm is what they call it, when the response is so massive in the lungs that you start drowning in your own fluids. Let's take a look at I call him, well, his channel's called Dr. Bean. And he's really a cool doctor. He's very level, and he'll give us a quick rundown on the vitamin D and how this works. And then once you know about this, guess what? If you're worried, take some vitamin D. Let's take a look at the video.
Now when the vitamin D level is low, that increases mortality and morbidity, or that increases the chances of a patient becoming severely ill because of the following mechanism. Number one, innate arm response of our immune system is blunted or it is reduced. in the vitamin D deficient patients. And we will discuss that today. We have talked about it many times before as well. Number two, because the innate arm is not working correctly, innate arm is like the first responder. So let's say this is the wall, and here is the pathogen. When the pathogen attacks us, the very first responders or defenders are the innate arm. And the innate arm cells, where they take care of the virus until the adaptive arm, which is the T cells and B cells, that becomes ready in 7 to 10 days. So in this study, they had used the readying time of the adaptive arm to be 7 days. So what they saw was that the innate arm, this arm, which was supposed to take care of the virus, as the virus enters our body and starts replicating and starts causing disease, that innate arm, in the absence, in the reduction of vitamin D, in deficiency of vitamin D, does not function correctly, which allows the virus to live here for 7 days in our body, less hindered by the immune system, and kind of have a party and keep replicating and keep having fun, and in that process destroy our tissues. But even more importantly, the viral load increases. What does that mean? The amount of virus present in the body is increased now. Why? Because nobody was stopping it from replicating. So there's a lot of virus in our body. That is increased load. Now, when the adaptive arm becomes ready, when this arm then becomes ready after 7 days, guess what? It looks at tons of virus in our body. There's too much virus in our body. Why there are too many virus in our body? Because we were vitamin D deficient. That made the innate arm less functional. That allowed the virus to become replicated a lot. When the adaptive arm became active, it looked around and it saw a lot of virus. Guess what did it do? It created the cytokine storm.
Cytokine storm, that's what gets you.
As we have discussed many times before, it created a severe immune response. That severe immune response, that imbalanced immune response, that harsh immune response responds to the virus a little less, but causes more damage to us. Enough damage to put us in ICU or even kill us.
The question might be, wow, it really gets some people. Why? Well, their immune system isn't functioning very well. Now, if you're sick and you've got chemotherapy going on and some of these other medical treatments happening to you, you're already a very sickly person, there's a chance your vitamin D is way down, especially if you've been stuck inside for a while, kind of been shut in. And one of the things I found out interesting about this is why there's a cold and flu season. Because you go outside in the summertime, that sun is hitting your skin. I'm not sure if light through the window can do it or not. Do you know, can light through the window help you get more vitamin D? Seems to me it kind of needs to be direct sunlight, but I'm not sure of that. Anyway, in the summertime, we get more light, the cold and flu season goes away, and now I actually understand why there is a cold and flu season. Because guess what? In the summer, we have a lot more vitamin D in our body. That gives us our first response, immune system response to it. If there's any colds trying to get around, you might beat it before you even have to have the 7-day response where your T cells come in and start killing it. It can't hardly go anywhere. You're not going to become very contagious. The whole thing kind of just dies out, and that's why the cold and flu season in the summertime is pretty much gone. Now, this COVID is strong enough where it's going still, but you notice the fatality rates have dropped. And this is very important. The fatality rates are dropping in the summer, and people are considering it not as serious of a disease now. But you know what? If we keep doing these masks and we keep preventing people from getting this disease, so now that they don't have immunity to it yet, guess what's going to happen in the fall time when all of a sudden the cold and flu season comes back? Uh-oh, we're in trouble again. Now, we're actually not in trouble because we have treatments that can basically solve the problems for these people. But the media is not telling you about the treatments. Why isn't the media telling you about the treatments? Why is it when the congresswoman didn't die because she took the hydroxychloroquine, what's the drug, malaria drug? Why why did you, I watched the media poo-poo that. Why? Well, they just can't let Trump have a win. The media, the Democrat media, and let's face it, come on guys, if you hadn't noticed during the Obama years, they couldn't say a thing bad about what he was doing, even though he managed to keep us in a recession for 8 years. And then Trump gets in there, and things are going gangbusters, we've got a great economy again, and they can't say a thing good about him. That's called the Democrat media. So most of the media is a mouthpiece for the Democrats, and they just can't let Trump have a win of where he actually signed the papers so that people can take this drug without having a bunch of testing done first, because the drug's already safe. It's a safe drug to take. They're trying to say it's going to give you heart troubles and stuff. The doctors I've heard said that's ridiculous.
This drug is rated as safe for pregnancy.
You can even, it is such a safe drug you can take it when you're pregnant. That's how safe this is. There's a whole bunch of drugs you can't take when you're pregnant because they're not safe enough for that. This one's rated safe for you to take it pregnant. And yet the media has to act like, oh, you can't be taking that, it's not officially approved and everything, and they're doing anything they can to keep people from taking this. How many people have died because of that? I mean, I think there's a bunch of people in the media that are just yes men that don't really know up from down. But some of them have to know that they're specifically preventing people who happen to trust them as a source. I don't trust them as a source. As a matter of fact, if they say one thing, I'm thinking the other thing might actually be true. Of course, you can't count on the left to be wrong all the time. But they've probably prevented many, many people from taking this drug, and then they died because of it. Wow. I guess they just consider that collateral damage. More important to get Trump out than if people die from COVID-19, because we're not telling them there's a treatment that works. So part of the mass hysteria is people don't know there's a treatment. So that's an unwarranted, that's why I call it mass hysteria. Hysteria is an unreasonable response to what's going on in reality. And in reality, we know who are in the high-risk groups. We know ways, vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C, cod liver oil. We know things they can do to prevent it from getting bad enough to where they get the cytokine storm.
Well, and the cod liver oil is giving you vitamin D.
Okay, yeah, cod liver oil has vitamin D. There you go. So we have, you wonder if everybody finds out they kind of need to take vitamin D, maybe it kind of disappears from the shelves. But remember, it's summertime. Go out and get some sun. For the shut-in people, take your cod liver oil. And you can research some sources for vitamin D other than just a pill bottle that says vitamin D on it. But we've got things we can do. And you could even, even if the stores are to say, look, you need to be in the high-risk group to get vitamin D, they need it, you don't. Because frankly, one of the things that I looked at the CDC tables earlier, and if you're under 50 years old, the chances of you dying from this is 0.05%, half of that of the flu. Really, anybody under 50 years old doesn't even have to really hardly worry about it. Now, if you are shut in and you're really sick, your vitamin D might be low, and okay, so maybe you should be a little bit worried, but what you should do if you're worried, take action. Well, it's kind of hard to take action if the news media, which is supposed to be on our side, is actually on the Democrat side, and they're just playing politics rather than telling you the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, they had that video, they had just a couple of days ago, there was a bunch of doctors and people who had been cured by taking the hydroxychloroquine, and doctors talking about how great it is. And they tried to put the videos up on YouTube, which is, if you didn't know YouTube, the left-wingers control that, and Facebook, Twitter. The left-wingers are in charge of all these social media things. And all of a sudden, they keep taking the videos down. What's really great, though, is you were saying that some people are putting it right back up again, even if they get their accounts suspended, because we have to start helping ourselves. We can't wait for the media, which is basically allowing people to die just so that they can try to make Trump's numbers get bad, trying to make the economy suppressed so that he doesn't get reelected. It's more important for them to do that than if people die from COVID-19. You really need to take a look at this media. You need to reevaluate where you can even trust what they say at any time. And they're certainly not on our side now, not the Democrat media. They're not helping you. They're in it for whatever they want to get out now. Well, we'd be foolish to just listen to what they have to say, and we've got to research this stuff for ourselves now. It's one of the reasons why I do it. I want to know anyhow. And of course, this video is here for you, so that you can get out of the grip of misinformation that we're currently in right now. So let's talk about the treatments that are available. Let's go to Dr. Richard Bartlett doing an interview in Texas, and he's talking about the success of this since March. And he also talks about how certain countries, like Singapore, have done what he's doing, and not because he did it, they figured it out for themselves. Remember, as Dr. Bean was telling us, when your vitamin D count is low, the virus multiplies abundantly in your body before the 7 days happens where your T cells start to kick in and fight it. But because there's so much viral load at that point, the cytokine storm occurs, and the cytokine storm can cause your lungs to fill with fluid as it's trying to fight it in there, and then you can die, basically of suffocation. Well, Dr. Bartlett, what he says in this interview, and we're going to put a link to these interviews for you so you can check all this stuff out for yourself. That'll be right there underneath the video here. You can see the link to every video we're showing you, and I'll put a little title above what's in there that we talked about. But Dr. Bartlett, he was worried in March, what am I going to do if somebody comes into my office and they need to be treated for this? What am I going to do for them? And he talks about being a Christian, and he talks about how he kind of takes a nap for a half hour. He gets up and he's like, he has this idea, and his idea is to use asthma medicine. Very safe medicine. It's been around for over 25 years. Anybody can take it. It's not even expensive because it's gotten into the generic form and so forth. And what he does is he administers this medicine with a nebulizer, which he says is better than just an inhaler. You can get this medicine in an inhaler, but the nebulizer is better because it gives you a more even application in the lungs. And what the steroid does, it's a steroid, is it lowers the immune response of your lungs, and it stops the cytokine storm from occurring. Meanwhile, he doesn't give you oral steroids because he wants your body's regular immune system to be up and running and learn how to fight this thing. But he stops the lungs from overreacting, and so while your body learns how to fight this thing, you get to the other side of it without drowning in your own fluids. It's not all that complicated. Well, some of these Oriental countries had figured this out on their own, that if they lower the lungs' immune response, the people will be fine. And he'll talk about in this clip how Singapore, with 24 million people, have had 7 people die. And they're stacked on top of each other in that country. You know, social distancing would be even hard to do, but they've had 7 people die for the whole COVID epidemic. So let's check that out.
We already have an answer for this. And to put things in perspective, let's look around the world. You know, in the country of Taiwan, there's over 25 million people. They're stacked on top of each other. If they did social distancing, they'd be out in the ocean floating around. Yeah. There's not enough room for them to do social distancing. But guess how many people have died to date during the whole pandemic in Taiwan? 7. As many people as you can stack in a minivan going down Central Expressway. And so the next time your viewers see a minivan, think, oh, that's how many people have died in a country of 24 million people. Now I'm going to tell you, yes, and I'm going to tell you why that's the situation. It's the situation also in Japan. 121 million people in Japan. They've had less than 1,000 people die during the whole pandemic. Singapore, only 12 people have died in the whole country during the whole pandemic. Iceland, well, that's not possible according to what we're being told in the mainstream media, but that's reality. Anyone can look it up. You can even look at the Johns Hopkins COVID website and you'll see those numbers. They're hidden in there, but I'm pointing them out because the people in Texas need to hear good news. In Dallas, they need to hear good news, and I have good news.
I'm sure you do. I'm blown away by those numbers. I gave up trying to write them down. But you're going to tell us somehow eventually when we get to this point that in these other countries...
They're doing what I'm doing, Debbie.
Okay.
They're doing what I'm doing, which is not hydroxychloroquine, although that works. And so what they're doing is an inhaled steroid. And so my silver bullet is inhaled budesonide. The brand name originally was Pulmicort, now it's generic. It's super cheap. It's about $200 for the total treatment if you pay cash. With insurance, many of my patients are not even having to pay for it. And you use a nebulizer machine. It's an asthma medicine. It's a respiratory anti-inflammatory for COVID, which is a respiratory inflammatory disease. And it works. 100% of my patients are alive. I've been treating this since March. And you use it for 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes to do a breathing treatment. You plug it in the machine in the wall. You put the medicine that's pre-mixed, pre-measured from the pharmacy into the little reservoir. You push the on button and you breathe it during 5 minutes
You
during
just
the
have a
commercial.
mask on your face and
You
breathe.
don't even have to have a mask. You can use a little mouthpiece that you hold in front of you,
Okay.
and you breathe it for 5 minutes. And I have, let me tell you what I've heard from patients when I started using this. They tell me, I feel better during the first treatment. And so their chest pain goes away. Their shortness of breath goes away. Their fever breaks. I'll give you an example. I have a patient who has 2 kinds of cancer. She calls me after 5 days of being flat on her back in her house in the bed, can't get out of bed, fever won't break for 5 days. She says, I heard you on the radio, and would you please help me? It's on a Friday. She says, my granddaughter tested positive today, and I think I have it. And I said, I'm sure you do with all the symptoms you're describing. She is currently fighting 2 forms of lymphoma. She's on chemotherapy right now. She just had radiation a month before for the lymphoma. She should die according to what you hear from the CDC and World Health Organization. But I gave her that treatment that night. In the morning, her fever had broke. She had her first good night's sleep. Over the weekend, she recovers. On Monday, she works an 8-hour day. She still is fighting cancer, 2 forms of cancer, but she's cured of COVID. She's symptom-free. She has her 2 consecutive negative tests. That's a cure.
Okay, can you say the name of the drug again?
Budesonide.
Budesonide. And so is it done in an inhaler?
It's an inhaler, and so it does actually come as an inhaler, but I'm using it in a nebulizer machine. You know, you see preschool kids use this. It's safe, that it is so safe. It's been out for over 20 years. It's been used on 2-pound premature babies safely, without batting an eye, and the fragile elderly in nursing homes for over 20 years. There's no reservations with it. It doesn't cause any cardiac risk, like the accusation of hydroxychloroquine is a risk of heart trouble, although that's ridiculous to make that accusation. This one doesn't even have that risk. And so I give that and an antibiotic to protect from secondary bacterial pneumonia. But let's talk about what COVID is. It's a respiratory virus that goes into the lungs, binds to ACE receptors in the lungs, and that triggers the release of inflammatory chemicals, and we call it a cytokine storm. That's a fancy word for inflammatory chemicals and enzymes that are released in the total body. And so with COVID, we have a killer that's never been around before. It is killing some people if they're not treated. And so for 50% of the people, they get it and they don't even know they had it. 50% of the people don't even know. But for the 20% that are at risk, there are treatments. We already have an answer. Let me tell you, you're right, Taiwan, 24 million people, they don't need to wait for a vaccine. They don't have a problem that you should vaccinate 24 million people for. They only had 7 die during the whole pandemic. We have some treatment plans and options that are already valid and working.
All right, so right there, Dr. Bartlett basically has just retold you what we've told you before, what the COVID virus is, how it gets to you, what causes you to die. And hydroxychloroquine, it's ridiculous to say that there's going to be a heart problem from it. I've heard that from several doctors, by the way. The media keeps pushing that to try to get people to not take it, and it will save lives. Wow. So at any rate, but he talks about how he's got treatments, and he's had 100% success. And really, what's interesting was, right there in that description, he talked about that cancer patient who came in, and she was already in trouble. She was having the shortness of breath, and she felt better after the first treatment. That was on a Friday. 3 days later, she's back at work. I mean, just from that piece of information alone, and that anyone under 50 really doesn't even have a problem with this unless your immune system's compromised. And for those people who, you know, if you're 30 years old, your immune system's compromised, you're going to want to look into one of these treatments. But we should be back to life as normal people. This is pretty stupid right now. Yeah. So one of the ways I'm helping you out of your COVID hysteria that the media is trying to cause in order to get Trump out of office is that you realize that pretty much nobody has to die from this. If you're under 50, you don't even have to really worry about it. You have to be in the worst 1% of health of people if you're under 50 to even think that you need to worry about this. If you're really sick and you've had some immune system problems, if you're the bubble boy or whatever, okay, you're probably going to want to do something. The rest of us should be life as normal. And when I had it, I was 57 years old. To me, it was just another cold. You know, and I don't even really take vitamins that often. I'm not really necessarily doing all that many health treatment tricks or anything, but I don't, wreck my body. I really didn't have a problem, because you know what? I'm not in the worst 2 or 1% of health of people. Those are the people that actually have to worry. And so you can watch the whole video by clicking on the link at the bottom of this video, and you can hear from him again, hear some, get some of this information. And if you think you're in trouble, you may want to go to your doctor and talk about some of these treatments and just get them. Not even that expensive if you have to pay cash. All right, now let's refer back to Dr. Bean, who explained to you about the vitamin D. He's got a lot of very informative videos, by the way, on YouTube. You may want to check his channel out. But here he's talking about Dr. Bartlett's treatment. And so let's see what he has to say about it. Let's see what this doctor has to say about the treatment that we just saw the video on.
So with this, let's go to our discussion here, the discussion at hand, Dr. Richard Bartlett. So he came onto a news media and he said that he has been using nebulizer with budesonide, and he has been treating patients with it with success. So here are some of my thoughts about this. Now, if we suppress the immune response early on, then maybe the overwhelming immune response can be prevented. And maybe that is how we can avoid the cytokine storm. And that will be given steroids early on.
Dr. Bean thought that giving them this treatment early probably does work based on his logic and how this whole system works. Now, I'd like to address the mask hysteria that's going on right now. We have governors and mayors mandating that people put masks on. Wow! Just a minute ago, I was talking about how we have treatments. Anyone under 50 doesn't really even have to worry about this thing for the most part. We should be going back to life as normal. Yes, the response to lock things down and find out what we were dealing with, and hopefully we can come up with some treatments, that might have been good at the beginning, but we've done all that. And it pretty much should be life as normal now. But I can tell you that as we go into the fall and it gets closer to election time, I think that the media, which is not telling you about these treatments that you can go get for you and your loved ones so that they don't die, I think that they're going to be pushing this narrative all the more. So much more important at that point that you've already seen this video or other information that's just as helpful to keep you from falling into their trap. So my wife, has Asperger's, which is a form of autism. And she does not habituate to things, which means she doesn't get used to them. And to wear the mask is quite an imposition to do on these people. And the question is it even worth it? And that's what we're going to go over right now. So what's some of the effects of going ahead and taking and wearing this mask? You did some research on that.
Yeah, I've been looking at this because whenever I would try to wear a mask, I would start feeling faint fairly quickly and start feeling nauseated and dizzy. And so I wanted to look at, well, has there been any actual real research in regarding these masks? And actually in 2008, there was research done. It was called the Preliminary Report on Surgical Mask-Induced Deoxygenation During Major Surgery. And this was a study done on surgeons who have to wear the surgical masks during surgery and do their oxygen levels go down. And it was found that, yes, their oxygen levels go down and their pulse goes up.
Wow, and we have a graph that Candy has looked up for that.
Yeah, it's from that research. Yeah.
Should we show it? Okay, so let's show you that graph and see what it looks like.
So here's actually one of the pages from that preliminary report, which you can Google. It's really easy to find. And specifically, this top graph here interested me. So it shows the average oxygen level of surgeons before they put on the mask and went in to do surgery, and then how their oxygen was lower after surgery.
Post-operation, look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then this was for under age 35, and then this was their oxygen over age 35, and then after they've been wearing the mask for a while, how we have a drop in oxygen saturation. And then furthermore, they found also that not only did they have a drop in oxygen saturation, but that their pulse rate would go up. So they'd start off, with their normal pulse, but after they'd been wearing the mask for a while, after they performed their surgery, their pulse was faster. And that again was found in both under age 35 and over age 35. Then also, there's going to be different individual factors as well. Maybe some people are better at oxygenating even if they have to wear a mask, while others are not. I personally am not.
Well, this explains why I was having trouble at work. At work, so I'm in the older category, I guess. At work, I'm crawling all over a big machine. I do not work in an air-conditioned environment, and because I'm wearing heavy cotton clothing for protection from electrical sparks and so forth, it was getting quite hectic to try to do all this and breathe through the mask. I would get dizzy a little bit while on the machine. Last thing I wanted to do was have some kind of problem up on the machine, which my coworkers would have to try to get me off the machine. So this whole mask thing is being quite inconvenient, and really, if the media was being honest, we wouldn't even be having to wear the masks right now. So I'm telling you, these Democrats are just messing everything up for all.
Well, now we have various lung infections from people who have been dutifully wearing the masks. We got fungal lung infections, for example, now.
Yes, and then we have these Americans who are really, we have some really good people in America who are trying to do the right thing, and they're looking at the people walking around without the masks like they're doing something wrong. And of course, if they're looking at me walking around without the mask, I'm not doing anything wrong. I did my research. I know that wearing it's a waste of time, and we're about to go over some of the videos.
Well, and if you want to have a fabulous way of lowering your immune system so that when or if you do catch this, you're liable to get sicker, go ahead and wear the mask and keep getting hand sanitizer on your hands all the time. Great way to lower your immune system.
Yeah, lower the oxygen content.
Yeah, lowering your oxygen and making yourself so sterile that you're not even coming into contact with just normal day-to-day viruses and bacteria. It's a great way to weaken your immune system, a great way to get really sick.
Well, here is a video that was done in the last 2 weeks on Fox News about the effectiveness of these masks. So let's take a look at this.
It measured and compared viral shedding in the coughing of 111 participants, some wearing masks, some not. The results? Among the samples collected without a face mask, we found that the majority of participants with influenza virus and coronavirus infection did not shed detectable virus in respiratory droplets or aerosols. For those who did shed virus in respiratory droplets and aerosols, viral load in both tended to be low. Wait, what? The majority of confirmed coronavirus infections without a face mask didn't shed detectable virus in respiratory droplets or aerosols? And for those who actually did, the minority, there was very little virus present? Okay, wait, it gets better. The major limitation of our study was the large proportion of participants with undetectable viral shedding and exhaled breath for each of the viruses studied. We could have increased the sampling duration beyond 30 minutes to increase the viral shedding being captured, but apparently people didn't want to do that. So again, let me just explain this. Over the space of 30 minutes, they were unable to capture any viral shedding in a large proportion of participants with confirmed known infections. Again, what? Indeed, they go on to explain that perhaps forced coughing might have helped. Forced coughing? So the issue, as is explained in this study, is that non-coughing or sneezing people are by and large not shedding virus in their ordinary breath. If they're coughing, well, of course that's a different story, of course. Someone who is actively sick is, well, they're actively sick. But especially now, many coronavirus infections are not symptomatic for cough. And among those actively sick but not coughing, They had great difficulty in this study finding virus expelled under lab conditions. And in lab conditions has extremely sensitive equipment. Again, these are people who were actively sick and had a fever. So much for the theory of asymptomatic shedding of infectious virus out of one's mouth or nose. By the way, the entire premise on which the mask mandates are predicated.
Wow. So, all these people walking around with masks, I think you wonder if the media is getting a kickback from these mask selling companies, you know. That's got to be all sorts of money
Yeah,
coming
really.
into them right now. And so all of these people, and me, it's actually dangerous at my job. If the media was accurately reporting on this, the employers wouldn't be requiring you to wear masks. And besides, it's summertime, our vitamin D is high. You know what, people? We need the virus to spread right now. Not slow the spread, speed the spread. We could, if the more people that get the virus right now, when very few people are going to have a bad response to it because our vitamin D's up, because the cold and flu season is not engaged right now, the more people that get sick with corona right now, the better. Every time you hear cases are up, cheer. That's a good thing because we're getting closer to herd immunity where this thing is not going to be breaking out on us all over the place in wintertime when people are going to be more likely to, the few people with bad immune systems will be dying from it, the lower 1%. So kind of things are upside down and backwards now, but you know they usually are when the Democrats are calling the shots, and that's what we've got right now. Let's go ahead and talk about the next item here, and that's going to be Ben Swan, who does a really good Truth in Media. Let's see what he has to say about this, because he's going to talk about masks and the tests that we had years before now when there wasn't so much politics surrounding the issue.
All over the
Like
country,
that?
we're seeing signs, people saying you must wear a face mask. Governors are mandating it, and even President Trump himself wore a face mask at a Navy hospital recently. It is all anyone talks about right now. And as I said, there are very strong feelings about this issue, as with everything else.
Feelings.
But if we
should
set
be doing
aside
some thinking.
feelings and we just look at facts, what do the facts say about wearing a face mask? What does science say about face masks and whether or not they prevent the spread of viruses like COVID-19? Believe it or not, there have been a number of studies that have been done over the past decade. One in 2009, 2010, 2012, 2016, 2017, 2019, and yes, even this year in 2020. A number of controlled studies have been done that look at this very issue, whether or not wearing medical face masks with N95 respirators in them, and whether or not wearing cloth masks actually reduce the risk of a virus. So what did each of these studies find? Well, actually, they all found the very same thing. Now, these were studies that looked at N95 respirator masks. That's not the same thing as just hanging a piece of cloth over your face or creating your own mask at home. We'll get to that in a minute. But let's start with the most scientific and medically advanced mask, the N95 respirator mask. N95 respirators versus medical masks, as worn by participants in this trial, resulted, get this, in no significant difference in the incidence of laboratory-confirmed influenza. Did you get that? In the 2019 study, there was no significant difference by wearing an N95 respirator mask. It happened again in 2020. Look at this one. A total of 6 RCTs involving 9,171 participants were included. There were no statistically significant differences in preventing laboratory-confirmed influenza, laboratory-confirmed respiratory viral infections, laboratory-confirmed respiratory infection, and influenza-like illness using N95 respirators and surgical masks. By the way, just to be clear, in the 2009, 2010, 2012, 2016, and 2017 studies, they all found the very same thing as the 2019 and 2020 studies. Again, all of these are RTCs, randomized controlled tests, that are essentially set up to determine whether or not these N95 respirator masks help to prevent the spread of viruses in this setting. And all of these studies found that they do not. Statistically, they do not. Now, there's another study that was also done in 2020. It was done by a group of researchers in Hong Kong. The study was conducted just before COVID-19 hysteria took over, and the results of it were released just a few weeks ago. And once again, those researchers found the very same thing, that there was, in fact, no statistical reason to believe that face masks will protect you, but improper use of a face mask actually puts you at greater risk of contamination. Look at this. In pooled analysis, we found no significant reduction in influenza transmission with the use of face masks. Our systematic review found no significant effect of face masks on transmission of laboratory-confirmed influenza. Proper use of face masks is essential because improper use might increase the risk for transmission. And there is more here, because remember, over and over we've been told something else that's pretty significant. We have been told that you must wear a face mask when you go out, and these N95 respirator masks are obviously the very best thing to wear, right? Which, as we're seeing, is not true, because those N95 respirator masks don't really protect you from transmitting and catching a virus. However, we're also being told that if you don't have an N95 respirator mask, which, by the way, the vast majority of people walking around in face masks do not have, they're not wearing N95 respirator masks. They're just wearing a cloth mask over their face. And what we've been told over and over is that if you just wear a cloth mask over your face, it's better than nothing, so you should do that. And so because of that, we have tens of millions of people walking around with cloth masks on their face. Now get this. In 2015, there was actually a study done taking a look at medical masks versus just a cloth mask, and whether or not wearing a cloth mask would protect against the spread of a virus. And what that study found in 2015 should alarm you. Not only does wearing a cloth mask not prevent the spread of a virus, it actually can put you at greater risk for catching the virus. Look at this. According to researchers, this study is the first RCT of cloth masks, and the results caution against the use of cloth masks. This is an important finding to inform occupational health and safety. Moisture retention, reuse of cloth masks, and poor filtration may result in increased risk of infection. Further research is needed to inform the widespread use of cloth masks globally. However, as a precautionary measure, cloth masks should not be recommended for HCWs, that's healthcare workers, particularly in high-risk situations, and guidelines need to be updated. So for those of you who are watching who are doubting all of this, please show me your RCTs, your randomized control tests that demonstrate how using an N95 respirator mask actually prevents the spread of a virus. I would love to see it.
Wow. So here we are with Laura Ingram giving us the lowdown that, first off, you don't even really have anything coming out of your mouth in the first place that somebody else can get sick from. And these are our people who actually have the fever and are sick with COVID-19 right now. They're just not so sick that they're coughing and sneezing. Once you get the coughing and sneezing point, you're in a different category. And you probably should maybe stay home if you don't want to give it to somebody else. Or go visit your other family members who need to get it so they have immunity before the fall kicks in. So to even the idea that you should be wearing a mask because virus is coming out of your mouth, and these are people who have a fever and they are confirmed sick with COVID right now. Now at my job, they're going to send you home for 14 days if you have a fever when you drive in there. But you don't even have to be coughing. Turns out that that's completely bogus. You're fine. If you're coughing and sneezing, well, maybe they should send you home till that goes away, but that's not going to take 14 days. And in this last report, the cloth masks that we're being told to wear that you see most people with, wow, that can actually make your chances of catching the virus even higher. Well, that's actually a good thing right now because it is the summer, and the more people that catch COVID right now, the better. But the people in high-risk groups, hope that you know your treatment options because you're not going to hear it from the Democrat media. My wife, she says that if they start making laws and forcing us to be wearing these masks, we're not just going to go and wear a mask that you're just stuck with wearing.
Yeah, I'm looking at if I'm going to be forced to wear a mask or I'm going to be facing fines or jail times or whatnot, then if I'm going to wear a mask, I'm going to wear a mask that has a statement on it. This is a really cool company that I actually found through ads on Facebook. It's gossgear.com.
Goss Gear. It turns out that they have masks that make statements, so you don't just have to walk around looking like another one of the people who doesn't know what's happening right now and hasn't bothered to find out if they're being lied to. You can actually wear a mask that makes a statement.
I've even seen one place, I don't remember, on Amazon, where you can actually design your own mask. So if you don't like the statements that Goss Gear provides, then you can do a search on Amazon. I found a seller on Amazon where you can type up your own statement that they'll put on the mask for you.
And it's not even that much more expensive to do so, right?
I think it's only about $3 or $4 more expensive than Goss Gear.
Yeah, I spent $10 at Lowe's to get a cloth mask. The strap broke on it, I think after 2 or 3 days of usage. What a waste of money. So now I'm just wearing the lightweight, throwaway, medical-looking ones just because my company requires it. Otherwise, I wouldn't wear one at all. But let's take a look at this one and what it says. It says, this is a mind control device. One of the things I've been somewhat disappointed about in my fellow Americans is how the Democrats can get their media geared up for a thing like this, and so many people just fall for it. And all of a sudden we're being, you know, the tail is wagging the dog. The 2%, 1 or 2% of sick people, and all the rest of us have to modify our lives. And out of those 1 or 2% sickest people, how many of them are that sick because it's their own fault? It's not like they were born that way, there was nothing they can do about it. No, they eat poorly, they've been smoking and have ruined their lungs. I'd say a good percent of that 1 or 2% are like that. And yet we're supposed to stand on our hands and do somersaults and everything to keep them from dying. The people who live right have to turn their lives upside down for the few people who live wrong, or the unlucky people. I mean, even if you were born with some kind of disease that puts you at risk here, I didn't do anything to cause this problem. So why am I having to do flips and twists? If you've ever heard of somebody called a bubble boy, somebody born with a compromised immune system, they have to put themselves in a bubble. Everyone else around them doesn't have to walk around with a mask on. And if they did, I guess it wouldn't work anyway. So things are upside down and backwards right now. That tells me that the Democrats are getting their way, and we really need to put a stop to this. But in the meantime, at least after watching this video, you can feel a little bit more comfortable about the fact that you don't have to worry about getting COVID-19. You don't have to be part of the hysteria. You can relax. As a matter of fact, tell your friends. The more people that know, the more of you that can call up your governor and tell him to just plain cut it out and quit falling for it, the better. Let's see where we are.
Oh, you're highlighting.
And he's going to talk about where we are right now.
All right, you are so editing this video.
Okay.
I like how you're looking at the screen at the back of your head. You can do a transition.
Yeah, that sounds good. So if you want to just get out of the chair, we'll talk about the numbers and we'll come back. Go full screen. As a matter of fact, let's bring it up. I gotta be behind me. It looks kind of wild. And then I'll turn. And here's his comment on where we are today with the COVID-19 situation.
That's fabulous.
Fabulous.
I think they're really getting it. You guys getting this? Re-cue Dr. Dude,
Okay,
this time with
where we
sound.
are on the minute.
Ugh. Ouch!
So I will make sure I get all of these links. All right, so now what we're going to talk about, or what I'll do is I'll show you a clip. Let's start over.
Who's that giant popsicle in the background? Looks like a rocket pop.
I know, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is that in New York? Is that the Chrysler Building?
Rocket pop.
Let's just go ahead and jump ahead here. Okay, so that's our edit.
I like it. So the editing cue is.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. This video's getting loud.
Yeah. Why don't I cue it up and we'll just move right into it.
Yeah, baby.
So, okay, ding.